The fifth question is told from the book The Blind Angel. Herzl lived a rich life in both spirit and worldly success. Even as a young yeshiva student, he was sought after as a great catch by outstanding, wealthy men seeking promising scholars for their daughters. For not only did Herzl excel in his Torah studies, the young man also had a practical head on his shoulders, a rare commodity in the rarefied world of the seminary. Herzl married and did not disappoint. The sharp analytical skills with which he navigated difficult Talmudic passages he now applied to complex business deals. Within a few short years, he'd expanded his father-in-law's respectable furniture concern into a major timber enterprise. Herzl was no less strict in fulfilling God's commandments. No financial emergency kept him from his daily Torah sessions with his study partner, and no winter storm prevented him from attending communal morning prayers. He supported a dozen good causes, and his generosity was celebrated throughout the town. Herzl was also a chassid, not your typical chassid, he'd acknowledged, for he balanced an appreciation of the mystical with a firm commitment to reason. In his younger years, he had scorned the very notion of a rational chassid as a blatant oxymoron. If the town of Zolotkov was a bastion of anti-Hasidism, and it was, and its yeshiva the citadel of this opposition, and it was that too, then Herzl was the most fervent spokesman for the anti-Hasidic cause. With youthful ferocity, he lambasted the budding movement as muddled Kabbalists who willfully transgressed hollow traditions, and their leaders, the Rebbes, a bunch of ignoramuses, charlatans who prey on the superstitious masses and can no better interpret a page of Talmud than a page of Turkish. Then, one Shabbos morning, Herzl decided to visit the small Hasidic shtibel of Reb Mikhail of Zlotkov, determined to witness firsthand the inanities these Hasidic rabbis passed off as wisdom. Herzl stood in the rear of the shul, his arms folded against his chest, and listened intently as Reb Mikhail addressed his Hasidim at the end of the service. The Rebbe belonged to the elite band of students of the Maggid of Mezrich, the distinguished disciple of the great Baal Shem Tov. On this particular morning, Reb Mikhail did not expound upon esoteric Kabbalistic mysticism, but on Talmudic law. Herzl was dazzled by the Rebbe's erudition, and so began his conversion from ardent misnagid to ardent chassid. Yes, Herzl seemed to have it all: affluence, intellectual rigor, spiritual sustenance, and the respect of his community. He also had a wife, Pesel, whom he adored and who adored him in return. There was, however, one painful gap in Herzl's otherwise complete life. He and his wife were childless. For years, Herzl and Pesel had visited fertility doctors across the region, traveling as far as Vienna and Berlin, but after too many dashed hopes, Herzl had come to terms with reality. It was God's will that he had no progeny. Well, he decided, if he could not raise children of his own, he'd help raise the children of others. With his considerable resources, Herzl established schools for impoverished students and provided for their medical care. He cared for orphans when they were young, and when they grew up, paid all their wedding expenses. Of course, surrogate children could not fill the void of a childless household, but Herzl had come to accept the divine judgment. Alas, such equanimity was not possible for Pesel. Her days were exercises in distraction, her nights torments of desperation. The festivals were worst of all. It's the bitterness itself I've come to detest, Pesel said to Herzl one night, not bothering to hide her tears. I hate the way the holidays make me feel, but what I hate even more is that I feel as I do. How often had she beseeched the Rebbe to intercede, to plead for them, to do something for heaven's sake, not only to hear the Rebbe repeat that God will act in his own good time. Several weeks before the holiday of Passover, Pesel paid yet another visit to the Rebbe, again asking for his blessing. Why is it always me who asks for this blessing, she demanded of Herzl when she returned home. Never you, of course not. You won't deign to ask for an exception from the normal course of biology. Nature is nature, right? Pesel, we've discussed this 100 times, Herzl said. You know the esteem in which I hold Reb Mikhail. He has taught me a great deal of Torah. He's also advised me on communal and business affairs. But full devotion to the Rebbe does not mean treachery to reason. No human being, not even a holy tzaddik like Reb Mikkel, can revoke the laws of nature. Let's face what we must. We cannot have children, so be it. So be it? Pesel shouted. So be it? Do you have any idea what it's like for me in shul? I can imagine, Hertz said softly. No, you can't. Through a slit in the lace that separates the women's section from the men's, I see you lost in your prayers or arguing over a page of Talmud with your admiring friends. I don't begrudge you. I'm proud of you. But it's not like that on my side of the curtain. For me, every Shabbos, every holiday is a day of mourning. Pesel turned away from her husband and took a few breaths before facing him again. I hear a baby cry in its carriage and I want to cry too because I have no child to console. My sister rushes to tell me her little Yonasan has just mastered the entire Aleph Bes, and I'm astonished at how a heart can burst with so much pride and despair at the same time. The children next to me sing their prayers and I accompany them with my broken sighs. I try to concentrate on the cantors chanting, but all I hear is the murmur of young mothers discussing diapers, baby carriages, baby shoes, schools, doctors, storybooks, nursing tips, who is pregnant and who is not, and I want to flee from the room. Sometimes I do. Pesel, Hertz said, reaching for his wife's hand. We have many blessings. Think of all the bickering between husbands and wives, a wretchedness we have never known. For your own sake, you must come to terms with the destiny ordained for us. This is the only way we can truly celebrate this coming Pesach. Indeed, Passover had always been the exception to the gloom that enveloped Pesel's days. On this night, their home bustled with family, friends, and needy strangers, all joyously participating in the lavish Seder. Pesel directed the presentation of the elaborate dishes, while Hertz, robed in his spotless white kittel, sat in regal splendor at the head of a long linen-covered table set with opulent china and glittering silver goblets. The Seder was filled with the spirited reading of the Haggadah and even more spirited singing that lasted into the wee hours of the morning. But the wheel of fortune spins to its own inscrutable rhythm, and those who have become those who have not. During the previous year, the market for Herzog's timber had abruptly dried up. He was over-leveraged, and the creditors came knocking. The banks foreclosed on his properties. In less than 6 months, Hertz was bankrupt. Nevertheless, he stoically endured his deepening destitution, for this was God's will, and he would accept whatever fate bequeathed. When the Seder night arrived, Hertz helped set the table, as he always had. But this year, there was no gleaming goblets, no fine china, and no fancy dishes. Gone, too, were the holiday guests. Still, a Seder is still a Seder, Hertz reminded himself. He was determined to create a festive mood as he could. He prepared the pillows for his chair, arranged the matzahs and vegetables on the Seder plate, and took out his well-worn Haggadah. He poured the first glass of wine and recited the Kiddush with Hasidic fervor. Lifting the matzah, he read aloud the passage describing the bread of affliction and prepared the second of the 4 mandated cups of wine. Here the Haggadah instructs the son to ask his father the manishtana, the 4 questions. Hertz hesitated. He bit his bottom lip and looked over at Pesel, who had been observing him. Each saw the tears in the other's eyes. Hertz tried again. And now the son asked, but instead he collapsed in his chair. I can't go on, he sighed, rocking slowly in his seat. Pesel had never seen him weep before. Father in heaven, he cried out, I'm sorry, but I can't continue with the Seder because I, your son, have a 5th question for you. My poverty notwithstanding, I have done everything you have required for the Seder. I've cleaned the house of bread, prepared the matzahs and the bitter herbs. I've set a beautiful table as possible with the few coins at my disposal. But I cannot perform the part of the Seder that calls for the child to ask the 4 questions. Why won't you allow me to fulfill your commandment, Master of the universe? Where is the child I need to complete my Seder? Pesel watched in astonishment as Hertz closed the Haggadah and put on his coat. To the Rebbe, he said, answering her unspoken question, I'll ask him my 5th question. Outside, a steady drizzle had begun to fall. The Jewish quarter of Zolotkov was eerily quiet. The storefronts had been shuttered since early afternoon, and the sidewalks were deserted but for the occasional young couple shuttling between their respective families, having promised, no doubt, to reverse the order of their visits the following night. The only voices one heard wafted from the dining rooms above the streets, where some children were reading the story of the redemption from slavery in Egypt, while other families were already enjoying the holiday meal. Hertz walked for 20 minutes and had almost reached the Rebbe's home when the rain, heavy now, forced him to take refuge under the nearest canopy. In an apartment directly above, an old man was reciting the passage describing the four sons and their respective responses to the Passover rituals. The wise son who inquires about the particulars of the ceremony, the wayward son who separates himself from the community, the simpleton who is confused by it all, and the fourth son, so dull he is unable even to formulate a question. The dumbstruck son, that's me, he said to himself, his tears merging with the streaks of the rain. All these years, I didn't know how to question. Well, now, I will not only ask, I will demand. He fastened the top button of his coat, pulled his hat down tightly, and marched into the sudden streets. The Zlotchover Rebbe showed no surprise at seeing Hertz standing in his foyer. He placed his hand on Hertz's wet shoulder and ushered him into the dining room, where the Rebbe's family and guests were seated at the Seder table. I have a fifth question to ask, Hertz started to say, but the Rebbe held up his hand. Yes, I know, the tzaddik said. As a matter of fact, your question already made an impact in heaven. I don't understand, Hertz said. Listen carefully, said the Rebbe. His hand still on Hertz's shoulder, the Rebbe continued with a nod to his guests. There's a lesson here for all of us. The great misfortune of your life, my dear Hertz, is that you have no child. You confronted this adversity without complaint as God's decree, admirably so. We must accept our circumstances as they are, pleased or not. But you have confused acceptance with acquiescence. You ceased to hope. Along the way you submitted to your lot as though it were immutable. Hertz looked toward his Rebbe. It's a conceit to think we know the ways of the world, Reb Mikkel said. To live life not expecting the unexpected. This surrender to fate is a rejection of faith. Hertz bowed his head. And so, this was your punishment. You weren't granted the child you didn't ask for. Your refusal to petition God, your ceasing to hope, led to the loss of your wealth. But tonight at your Seder, at last, you asked the fifth question. And my dear, precious Hertz, tonight your question has been answered.